All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. I would like to pass it first to Rana from Northwest Film Forum to give us a little bit of a welcome.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
You
You're
won't
able
be
to be
able
on
to
camera.
see me. I
Okay.
know. I'm joining you today from the traditional lands of the Lenape. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, producing live shows, which is a lovely thing to have returned to. And unfortunately, I'm in an Airbnb with very, very terrible internet. So my hope is that even just my voice will stay with you and carry through. Um, It is such a pleasure to be here this evening. Northwest Film Forum is so honored to be collaborating with Seattle Rep and Donkeysaddle Projects and Dinyar Productions to bring this program to you today. And thank you all for being here. I know some folks had some trouble logging in, and if that's the case for you, the program will still continue to be available through the weekend. You can use the same login and the same password to be able to view it. And if you enjoyed what you watched and want to watch it again, the same password and link will get you there all the way through the weekend. And I won't take up too much more of our time. I'm going to pass it right back to Nabra, who is our gracious host for the evening. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much, Rana. It's such a pleasure to partner with you. My name is Nabra Nelson. I'm the Director of Arts Engagement at Seattle Rep, and I'm also a Dunya Productions Ensemble member. Assalamu alaikum. It's so nice to see you all here. For a physical description of myself for any blind and low vision audience members joining us today, I'm a light-skinned brown woman with short brown hair, a red blazer, and some black and white photos behind me on a white wall. As I'm doing my little intro, giving you some Zoom etiquette and things like that to help out new Zoomers, it would be wonderful if you could put any response you have to the film in the chat. It can be a one-word response, one word that kind of is resonating with you right now, or maybe if there's a moment from the film that's really sticking with you right now. Please do put that in the chat and introduce yourselves to each other. I'd like to acknowledge that here in Seattle, we are on the traditional land of the Coast Salish people, including the Duwamish people, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. And this acknowledgement does not take place of authentic relationships with Indigenous communities, but only serves as the very first step of honoring this land and paying homage to the Indigenous folks who came before most of us. The chat box is open throughout this conversation for questions, comments, and technical issues at any time. You can chat me privately, directly if you have specifically technical issues so I can get to you as soon as possible. You can turn on or off subtitles or view them in a separate window pane by pressing the button at the bottom of your screen that says CC Live Transcript. I wanted to reiterate that 25% of the proceeds from this entire weekend will go directly to support Washington state families impacted by police violence through Katrina Johnson's organizing, and the remaining proceeds go to supporting the co-presenting organizations Donkeysaddle Projects, Dunya Productions, and Northwest Film Forum. The panelists that we have tonight are Jen Marlowe, who is the filmmaker for There Is a Field and the founder and director of Donkeysaddle Projects. Dr. Neda Elia, who is an activist and professor of Arab American Studies at Western Washington University. Katrina Johnson, who is a senior community organizer with Vocal Washington and previously worked for Real Escape from the Sex Trade, or REST. And Katrina became a social justice activist and advocate for her family in June of 2017 after her first cousin, Charleena Lyles, was killed in her home in North Seattle after police officers responded to the location to investigate a burglary Charleena had reported. And Dr. Jasmine Mahmoud is a curator, arts advocate, and historian of art and performance. She is currently the Assistant Professor of Arts Leadership at Seattle University and soon to be Assistant Professor of Theater History, Theory, and Criticism at the University of Washington. An incredible panel of folks. Y'all can turn on your videos. Hello, hello, and we will kind of jump right in. I would love to start with just what each of you are taking away from the film today in light of everything happening in the US and Palestine and the constantly changing news. I find that this film hits differently every time I see it. And I watched it just last week, and it was a very different experience than I think would be watching it today. So what is resonating for you in this film today, specifically, and with what's happening right now in your lives, in our local community, and internationally? And anyone can jump in who's ready to share.
I'll start. What resonates with me is just like I felt connected to that struggle because I'm an impacted family member. And so it was an instant connection, and therefore it was triggering almost. And just like really understanding and connected to the things that they were going through, because the families here that I work with and myself as an impacted family member, we all go through those things. And so it was interesting to see the similarities and the struggle for justice for Asil that are similar to what most families are dealing with in the United States and here locally in Washington State. And so, like, even just kind of sitting with that and knowing that we just got a decision and charging documents in the death of Manny Ellis today, and those officers will be charged with it just really, it's, it's just heavy. I just feel really heavy. But also feeling like, we're still impacted families are still going to rise out the ashes like a phoenix. We don't have any other choice but to continue to fight. We didn't ask for this. We were dragged into it. And so it becomes our new normal.
I can share, I think, two things. I think first, kind of this despair of who is the state for and who is the state protecting, and kind of these really eerie similarities between the ways in which Palestinian bodies are marked and Black bodies are marked by the state, and the lack of protection. But I think on another hand, thinking about the power of theater and storytelling, and just like the kind of eerie but maybe hopeful thinking about Asil being buried in this Seeds of Peace shirt, and thinking about this idea of seeds and kind of the storytelling as the seed to speak back to the state is something that I'm left with.
Nada, I can tell you're talking, but I think you're muted.
I am muted. I should know better, right? Okay. So I want to say, I mean, actually, I don't feel any different today from the last time I watched it. The last time I watched it, I actually showed it in my class on comparative cultural studies, as an example of joint struggle, as an example of solidarity. And that was in very early March. So almost 3 months ago, a couple of months ago. And so if I want to compare the two showings, because of course I watched it with my students as I watched it just now, I don't feel very, very different. I feel that we're still dealing with the same thing: extreme police brutality, extreme violence from the state. And if anything, what's happening right now in Jerusalem is once again, I mean, the Israeli police forces and military are once again terrorizing the Palestinians throughout historic Palestine, primarily in 48 Palestine, where they are dragging women from their homes. They are brutalizing the Palestinians. So, it's like, it's more of the same in some ways, that I don't feel that this is different. The film itself is still very relevant. and was never meant to reflect the present moment. It is a film about one moment in time. I would say that, even though the film is about one moment in time and a moment that we see over and over and over and over again, including today in Jerusalem, at the same time, the political climate itself is what has changed. And I would say the political climate is very different both in Palestine and in the US today than the moment that the film represents. And it's a political moment that despite the pain, despite the fact that, as Katrina said, we are dragged into the struggle. I mean, most of us would rather not be in struggle, right? Because, it wouldn't be called a struggle if it was easy. So we are dragged into it. And yet there's also a feeling now that maybe that was not there 20 years ago of empowerment, of power, not just empowerment, but power, hope, optimism. And it is a result of joint struggle. And that documentary is basically documenting the connections that have been made.
Yeah, I've obviously watched the film many times in the process of making it, and since then. But preparing myself for this conversation tonight, I was thinking both of the events of the last several weeks in Palestine, and specifically, I was thinking at the end of the film, you see images of Nardine with her young children. She has now 3 children whose names are Tayyib is her oldest, and then her littlest is the little girl Sham, and the little boy is named Asil after his uncle, who he never had the chance to meet. And little Asil was actually born on his uncle's birthday. And they live in Haifa. And Haifa is one of the Palestinian cities that is now a mixed Palestinian Jewish city within 1948 Israel, in which there were mobs of extremist, supremacist Jewish Israelis who were marching down the streets, accompanied and protected by the police as they chanted "Death to the Arabs," smashed cars, ransacked homes, ransacked businesses. And I was just, I was imagining Asil's young nieces and nephews, and actually he also has a 1-year-old nephew that is the baby of his sister Siwar. So Nardine has 3 kids, and Siwar has 1-year-old little boy. And just imagining, how are these tiny kids who are so precious, who are such precious humans, how are they understanding this unbridled display of racism and hatred that is so clearly supported by the state? What does that do to a young child growing up in that reality? And then I was also thinking, Katrina, of you and your family, and I didn't realize that what you said about Manny Ellis, that just came down today. So I need to be getting online and reading more about that. But through you and through your tireless fight, Katrina, you've also introduced me to so many other Washington state family members who have been directly impacted by supremacist state violence here. And so I found myself just thinking more today about how we can connect all of these struggles together in order to strengthen them. And it's not just about solidarity across different struggles. I think for me, it's about identifying how are these struggles actually connected in terms of the systems of power and privilege that we're up against, and in terms of our what we're fighting towards for equity and liberation, and how do we envision that together and build towards that together. So those were my thoughts from today.
I'd love to actually kind of dig deeper into what you just said as well. There really does feel like there's this special synergy between the movement for Black Lives and the movement for Palestinian liberation and freedom. What would you say, how could you articulate, and anyone can answer this if you have some way to answer it, articulate the root of that synergy? Why is there such a clear connection between those two movements and two struggles? either on the kind of causes or on the kind of where they're headed.
I guess I'm going to jump in. I mean, we're looking at Palestinians in Israel and Blacks in the US, and both communities have been criminalized, historically criminalized. Their very existence is criminalized. The assumption is always that you are guilty until proven innocent, and usually you cannot prove yourself innocent, right, to the state because you are criminalized. It's like the state does not want you. The violence of the state is a racialized, state-sanctioned violence, the incarceration, the police killings, the brutality, the sanitizing, the normalizing of the brutality. I mean, when we see police brutality here in the US, we should no longer call it police brutality. It is policing, and policing is brutal, right? And it's the same thing with the Israeli states dealing with the Palestinian people. It's not that there are moments when there's brutality. The entire system is brutal, just like entire policing here is brutal in its treatment of the Black people, or of marginalized people, of criminalized communities, of racialized communities. And there's more than the Black, but primarily, I mean, the visibility of the brutality against Black people in this country is something that, that is so very obvious. You're born a criminal in this country as a Black person, according to the state. And it's the same thing with Palestine. And so the synergy is organic. I mean, we do need to reach out and get to know about each other, because one thing about minority communities, one thing about any of the communities that don't speak the discourse, is that it takes an effort. It is intentional to go out and learn about the experiences of another community that is not the dominant discourse, because it's so much easier to actually learn about, the US, land of the free, right? Rather than the US, land of brutality. So there's an intentionality in reaching out, getting to know each other. But once you do, you realize just how much you are in the same situation, even though we're two continents apart.
I guess I can add, I'm thinking about after Michael Brown was murdered, one of the things that the Ferguson report revealed, the US Justice report about what happened in Ferguson, was that the mostly white police department was fining Black people in Ferguson for being Black. So Black people were fined for causes like manner of walking, manner of sitting, having their trash cans opened half an inch, and thinking about kind of doing that to find them and then to extract money for them to fund the mostly white police department in a town that was about 67% Black. And so I think about it, that extraction that's happening, and a lot of scholars use this term racial capitalism, but the ways in which, and I think there's similarities between Black folks and Palestinian people, how they're being murdered, things are being stolen from them to extract from them for wealth. And so that's one of the things I think about, is the ways in which extraction's happening to them, to their bodies and to their communities.
Those are incredibly good points and well articulated. And I want to also dig into something that you have touched on, Nada, which is this importance of solidarity across communities and across social justice movements. What is the importance of that? I mean, we can each kind of have our own social justice movements, and it will theoretically kind of bolster equity and social justice across communities across the world. But what is the importance of having solidarity and intentional solidarity across social justice movements like the Black and Palestinian movements? And also, what does that solidarity look like in practice?
Were you asking me?
It's for anyone. You can start, and then we can jump to Katrina.
I'll start, but I think everyone's contribution is something that I would want to hear. For me, it's like we do not live in silos, and we cannot work in silos. solidarity is absolutely essential and a given. There are so many intersections that even if we were to want to live in silos, actually that's impossible. Am I an immigrant? Am I a woman? Am I a person of color? Am I a minoritized community? I mean, where do I fit? I fit everywhere. And so my solidarity is with all of these criminalized, disenfranchised, marginalized, sexualized, racialized communities. Even if I look at one cause, I don't think that like the cause of Palestinian decolonial liberation, I don't know that I could possibly operate without solidarity from other communities. In fact, in the very specific example of Palestine, the one call that Palestinians feel is going to help liberate Palestine is BDS, and BDS is a call for solidarity. The struggle is a struggle that relies on the solidarity and activism of our allies. Palestinians themselves within Palestine cannot engage in the kind of BDS that's going to liberate Palestine. So the importance of solidarity is absolutely at the very core of struggle. And at the same time, solidarity is not transactional, it is not one way, it is encompassing of all the struggles. And also, I mean, one image that I always have in mind is, and I'm sure we've all seen it though, the little fishies and the big fish, they organize the little fishes so that they can attack the big fish. Does anyone know that image? All right, I mean, that to me is solidarity. Alone, we can't scare the big shark away. All of us, we can scare the big shark away. So that's also solidarity, but it also is organizing, because we can be all the little fishies in the sea, and if we're not organized to scare the shark away, we're not going to succeed. So solidarity and organizing are essential.
Thank you for that. And for those who don't know, BDS stands for Boycott, Sanctions, and Divestment. And Katrina, I know you were going to jump in as well.
Yeah, what I would say is I think it's by design that they want to keep us in those silos and making it seem like this problem is only affecting this community and that's only their problem. And then quickly, once you begin to realize that it's everybody's problem. It's everybody's problem, even if it hasn't affected you. And I use the word yet, because it's only a matter of time for any of us. We never know what tomorrow's going to bring, right? And so that's why solidarity is important. And I had Michael Bennett, who's a professional athlete. He took me to an event that he was sponsoring with a lot of Palestinian folks. And one of the ladies said to me, she was like, I fight for you and I fight for your family. I fight for Black lives, because if Black lives don't matter, there's no way that Palestinian lives could matter, because we're almost underneath you guys. So if you don't matter, we can't possibly matter. And I was like, wow. I mean, I never ever thought about it that way. And then watching this film, I was just like, yeah, I get it. And it's kind of like that aha moment. And I think that when we are united, that builds power, and that's what they're afraid of. And it's going to take all of us to dismantle this system. And it can't just be someone else's problem.
And if I can just add to what you all have said so powerfully, I think, I think solidarity is not, it's certainly not national in the sense of, if I come to your demonstration, will you come to mine? In my mind, it really is about the deep, long and slow work of relationship building. And like Neda said, like taking the time to intentionally learn about each other's communities, which there's reasons why, like Katrina said, it's so much easier to be siloed. That's intentional. And I think it's not only, I think it's true that we're stronger when we're together and we're fighting together against these systems of oppression. But I also think it's because once we do dismantle those systems, and we're thinking about what we're building in their place, we need to be imagining together. We need to be dreaming together. We need to be forging a joint vision of liberation and justice together. And that can only happen if we're in deep community with each other. So I think finding every chance to build that together is going to be vital. It already is vital.
Thank you. And to dig even deeper, just think about really specifics, you know, the showing up for each other, kind of being in conversation are obviously tactics of solidarity that are really important. But I'm also wondering what each movement can learn from each other. Are there tactics in the movement for Black Lives that can be applied towards the movement for Palestinian freedom and vice versa? And are there elements of those movements that don't translate across movements as well?
I think two things I'm thinking of. First, to kind of combine those questions. Performance artist Ricardo Gamboa, kind of a colleague of mine, defines solidarity as we take the risk together. And I think about that a lot. How am I taking a risk with someone? When I say I'm in solidarity, what does that mean? But I think when it comes to tactics, one of the things I've taught in my classroom that I've learned from other dance scholars is and there's two dance scholars, Megan Quinlan and Natalie Zerveau, is to think about the choreography and the meaning of protest gestures. So I do exercise in my classroom. We've done it over Zoom and I've done it in person, where we enact a series of protest gestures. So we lean forward like we're at the lunch counter sit-ins. Awkwardly over Zoom, we pretend like we're holding hands, and we pretend like we're holding hands like this. We lay on the ground, we kneel, we have our hands up, and we hold in fists. And when I do each of those movements, I ask my students, what meaning is your body making? What meanings might other people be putting on your bodies? And what meanings might all of our bodies be making together? And it's a space for students to really think about. There's a quote by Judith Butler that my body is not mine, because of racism and horrible discourses, but also because of positive things like theater. People put meanings on all of our bodies. And I know as a Black woman what people think about me when I walk into a space, even with my mask on, the glares and things I get, but how that might be deployed tactically in a political movement. So thinking about, what does it mean for 1,000 Black people to go like this in a political movement? What does it mean to have those white moms in Portland stand in front of Black folks in Portland, or stand behind them? What are the different meanings that our bodies create, and how might we deploy those tactically through gesture as part of change? So that's one of the things I think about when I think about tactics. Is there's ways in which our bodies are marked that are often really harmful, but also we can deploy those for change. And we can recognize how, because we're differently marked in different ways, other folks might be in solidarity with us, to stand with us, stand behind us, stand next to us as we fight for change.
That's extremely well said. And actually, and folks can continue to answer this question, but it also transitions really well into my next question, which was really about specifically art and theater in social justice movements. This film not only, illustrates the similarities and the what solidarity might look like between two very prominent movements in the world. But it also really demonstrates the power that theater can have and art can have in bringing together communities, illustrating issues that are going on, and helping folks process that as well. And even as you are just articulated, Jasmine, rehearsing tactics for protest, for change, for social justice in a variety of ways. What do you all feel is the role of art and theater in social justice movements, either as participants yourselves, as artists yourselves, but also as organizers who are often bringing the arts into social justice spaces? How do you use the arts? How do you use theater to move forward these movements.
Well, I could go, and I absolutely do not consider myself an artist, but I certainly rely on art and theater, and like it's something that I always bring in my classes. I'm not an artist. I'm a teacher of, of social justice and social movements and cultural studies. And for me, it's like I always start with the assumption that absolutely everything is political, that art and theater are political. Some are openly so, others are not, but there is no such thing as the apolitical cultural production. It doesn't exist. Either it's reinforcing the dominant discourse, or it's sanitizing history, or it's reinforcing the story of the privileged classes, or it can embellish the past, or it can embellish the present, or it can erase the experiences of certain communities. And then what we consider political art and political theater is basically that which narrates the experience of the criminalized, of the invisibilized. But whichever it is, art and art and theater are political, and they bring in an experience that would be much harder to understand theoretically, because art is sensed, is grasped, is art. The best art is not something that you theorize about as much as first feel and then relate to. So as such, I think that art and theater is like, in social justice movements, they can actually reach community members who are not otherwise exposed to the stories of other communities. So it is a way of narrating the story of a community that is very, very accessible to others. And again, I will maintain that it's always political, and that some of it is viewed as political and others is viewed as not. And art that is viewed as political is generally the one that is not exactly the dominant discourse, not exactly the story that we hear on mainstream news, and then it becomes political, but it is all political. And it is important to always be aware of what is being produced by those communities, because it expresses the lived experiences of those communities. Sorry, I'm not being very articulate.
I think you're being really articulate. And I was just going to add that, when I teach about theater, I often teach about blackface minstrelsy, which, grew up in the 19th century. White actor T.D. Rice from New York comes to the South, supposedly sees a Black man perform, supposedly so inspired, burns cork, puts it on his face, and so begins blackface minstrelsy. And it's important for so many reasons, but one, because it's a white person's idea of Blackness, and two, blackface minstrelsy in the 19th century becomes the most popular form of entertainment and spreads horrible, pernicious things about Black people, about race and racism. And so thinking about that, thinking about the harmful things of the arts, which we can maybe see in today and, watching TV, but the other side of it, that the arts, as you said, now that is this place of where things are sensorially engaged. And I think on the positive side of it, I think about that theater is important for two reasons. One, because it often archives stories by communities that are often decentered, and especially communities where maybe things are not housed in text, but they're housed in bodies, and that knowledge is important. And two, I think that theater is a place to imagine new worlds. And we need that for politics. We need that space. We need that literal stage to stage new worlds. And so thinking about watching this film of a play where they are doing all of these, they're archiving these stories. And this is the only way I learned about Asil's life, is through this and through this theater production, and Jen, through your film, and also in that imagining new worlds. And with my despair watching the film, with that despair, it's motivating me to push harder for new worlds. So those are the things I think I value in theaters, that archival element, but also that we can, through theater, stage what can be.
I think, art tells the stories that our words sometimes can't really convey. Working alongside young people, sometimes they don't have the words to describe how they're feeling, but they can draw something that really resonates with people. And it links them to struggles, and it builds solidarity. I mean, if you think about all of the art that we saw after the murder of George Floyd and how powerful it was, it was just art. No words ever had to be spoken. You just saw it and you understood what you were feeling, because it was painful, but it also was, gave you a sense of resilience and power and things like that. And so it's always pivotal in anything that we do, in everything that we do, because everybody's form of protest is different. And I think that art is a form of protest, and we have to allow people to, express themselves in the way they seem fit. And it's not always with words.
I definitely want to just say ditto to everything that my brilliant co-panelists said. And then just one thought to add is, I think sometimes art and storytelling provides an alternative form of justice. I mean, so often I think there's many elements to seeking justice, and I think two of those elements are accountability and also truth telling. Having the truth be told, having the truth be recognized, and of course, especially when the violence and the oppression is in the hands of the state, right? When the state is the perpetrator, and then the state also controls the systems of official justice, justice is never going to happen. And I think art and storytelling and theater, art in all of its forms, provides it's not a substitute for official justice, and it's not a substitute for dismantling those oppressive systems and replacing them with the ones that theater can help us envision, as Jasmine said. But I think it also makes sure that the truth is told, that truths are told, and that they're pointing towards some level of accountability.
Thank you. Incredibly well said. It very much validates myself as an artist personally, but really inspiring, and I hope any other artists listening tonight feel that push, especially right now, to continue to make art and continue to have art be part of our social justice movements. We are coming near the end of our time today, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we would be able to get to maybe one or two of those questions. But I would kind of, for my questions, to end with, Nada and Jen, you were both in the film. We saw you in those little moments, and you were there in the room, during this reading process, during the rehearsal process. What was that process like? Is there anything, special that happened that you want to share? Any conversations that took place that were really impactful, or even what was the energy in the room putting that together? Was it a somber process or one that was energizing? I'd love to know a little bit more just about what it felt like to be a part of that process.
It was energizing. I mean, we were together, like in one house under one roof for many days, working very long hours, very, very long hours. I was like, can we
Sorry, that's
sleep
my
now?
fault.
Yeah, can we sleep now? It's 2 a.m. We need some sleep. So that was the kind of like, the exhaustion, and at the same time, the connections that we made. It was a unique experience in that, as I said, it's like we knew we were building something worthwhile. We knew we were engaged in a project that, of course, requires time and energy, and the challenges of being under one roof and not sleeping and not showering. Well, we were showering, but anyway, and there, it was community. It was really community building. And I think many of us had come together who did not know each other. Lots of people already knew each other. There were groups, but we ended up being a community and knowing each other and knowing and working together. And it felt like, I mean, I don't usually say that, but it felt like a community, an extended, a village, a family. And I don't know that there were any memorable moments, except maybe that, I mean, I think it was Marquis, no, St. James, who asked me how to wrap a kafia. And I did that, and I showed him how to wrap the kafia. And all of a sudden, everyone was trying to wrap the kafia like I had taught him to wrap the kafia. And that moment, I mean, for me, that was an amazing moment. That one person for the play needed to wrap the kafia, and only one. I don't think somebody else wears the kafia, had to have it. I mean, but then everybody was like, yeah, I want one too. And they were starting to wrap the kafia. So for me, that was an amazing moment that, among many, many amazing moments. But I want to say, obviously, and anyone who's done any kind of theater, and I actually, now that I think of it, in college, I did a whole lot of theater. You know how exhausting it is. You know the long hours. You know the repetition. And yet there's always, I mean, the energy that comes with it, and that was very much there. Energy, community, friendship. And I think that it's something that everybody took home, wherever home is geographically, but also politically, our political home. Everybody took home the community and the experience and the knowledge gained from being there, including maybe how to wrap a kafia.
And just to add, I think that actually, Neda, what you were just saying, I think refers back, Nabra, to your question about what is the role of art in movement building. And if movement building is relationship building, and I think at its core, that's really what is at the heart of movement building. I've been to a lot of seminars where there's folks who are brought in, and you spend a weekend together, and it's about trying to create relationships across different movements, and there's seminars and there's discussions and things like that, and everybody goes home at the end of the weekend, and whatever was built there kind of like feels like it fizzles. Like the relationships, you have the chance for them to develop a little bit. But I think the difference between that kind of experience and experience of bringing a group of folks together that are in the process of creating something together, and in an artistic process that has a product that they're working towards, an artistic product, and with an artistic process, I think that maybe is the difference between the sort of weekend retreats that are discussion based versus bringing art into the space as a mechanism to build community and to build movement. And there's been all kinds of partnerships that have developed from the folks who were together for making the film. There's been so many different ways that those relationships have sparked collaboration and joint work and movement work outside of that structure. And to me, that's one of the most beautiful outcomes of the entire project.
Well, thank you so much. We've come to the end of our time, and it's been a short panel, but one that was so full of incredible insight and inspiration. Thank you so much to each of the panelists for being here tonight with us. Thank you to everyone who joined us in attendance and watched the film. It'll be available through the end of this weekend, so please tell folks to check it out. And this panel I believe the recording will also be available to ticket purchasers. Jen, do you have something you want to share last minute here?
So just wanted
Yes.
to let folks know I just dropped a link in the chat box, and that link, it would be wonderful. I just dropped it again. If it should just take 5 minutes. It's an exit survey which allows us to know some of your thoughts and reflections on the film, on this conversation. Also, if you want to stay in touch with us and with our work, gives the opportunity to do that. So it'd be wonderful if folks don't mind taking 2-3 minutes to do that. And thank you, Nabra, and just huge thanks to Seattle Rep, to Northwest Film Forum, and to Dunya Productions for collaborating and letting us have this conversation and program.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Please continue to support these movements and each of our partner organizations. And we hope to see you at the next conversation. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you.